California's oil and gas industry needs federal intervention. Stat. We need the feds to come in and take over because California's policies are so terrible that national security is at stake, specifically West Coast, best coast. How so? Let's get into it. Here we go. So somebody sent me this article, and I started off thinking, all right, has California's oil and gas industry hit the point of no return? You know, we got two refineries that got closed down one closed down in October. I'm talking about the Valero and Phillips 66 refineries. And then we've got one that's supposed to close in April of 2026, but they've moved up the timeline to January of 2026. They're just like, yep, we're out of here. We're out of California. And so has California's oil and gas industry hit the point of no return? I think we're there. And within this article, we start talking about some of the exposure we have with this little oil production, little oil refinery going on in California, and its impact on national defense. Like Washington State, Oregon, we're not exactly huge on oil. We just don't have any. We don't have any oil reserves. So we're not really doing any of that. California is where so much oil comes from, should be coming from, but doesn't. And as a result, they're importing it, which means you've cut off your domestic supply because of all this green nonsense. Just a bunch of policy that makes zero sense. Kind of like Joe Biden saying, well, we're going to be dependent upon oil and gas for at least another 10 years. And you're like, are you just mentally challenged? And come to find out he was. That's why they pulled him, and then they put in Kamala Harris. Good Lord, what was going on there? Most California residents recognize that California's highest in the nation gas prices. You know, I would argue that Washington State is neck and neck there because of, again, progressive policy that is just, or self-inflicted, as is the gasoline crisis in the state. 100%. California's gas prices, totally self-inflicted, just like Washington State's gas prices. This is subsequently increased dependency on foreign oil suppliers and shippers to supply fuels. Now think about that. We get into a war. We can't create our own oil. We can't, extract it from the earth and refine it. It's got to come in on ships that take 4 to 6 weeks. You got no ability to control your supply. And what if they just say, oh yeah, we're in a war? No. Yeah, we're not sending you any oil. Oh, what do we do? And then you stop flying the Air Force, right? Don't have the ability. Don't have the fuel to fly the Air Force. And they're the biggest of the armed forces, the biggest consumer of jet fuel. And as we reported recently, this poses a direct threat to U.S. military force readiness on the West Coast. A bunch of you are going to say, don't care about the West Coast. It should be nuked off the face of the earth. And you know what? I'm kind of right there with you. What if? That whole West Coast should. What if that happened? What if Idaho became waterfront overnight? Wouldn't that be something? California today produces less than 23% of its own in-state petroleum needs and imports over 65%, and it doesn't need to. It doesn't need to, of its crude from foreign sources. We're going to see, like Brazil, like Iraq, like Saudi Arabia, Ecuador. I mean, run those through. Yeah, Iraq. Yeah, they don't support terrorism at all, do they? Oh, they do? Oh, good Lord. Yet the oil and gas industry in California account for nearly 8% of the state's GDP, even in its diminished capacity. But that 8% is so important because you can't create the rest of the GDP without oil. It's in everything. Everything. And people who don't get that, they're like, it's so green. We want to be so green. We're going to be dependent upon oil for at least another decade. And you're like, what have you been smoking? I want some. In 1988, the state of California only imported about 4.5% of all the oil that it consumed. By 2020, importing over 70%. Here is what that looks like. Here's the countries. Guyana, we've got Brazil. And in Brazil, you got to cut the rainforest down to get to the oil, right? Does that make any sense? And then remember, we're bringing all of this oil on ships like this, and this is AI, this is fake, but this is what it would look like, right? So that I don't have any ridiculous copyright infringements. Billowing, huge smokestacks of that sludge fuel that they burn into the atmosphere. But because that's an import, doesn't count against the domestic California metric of, oh, we're so green, everything's so great. We got Ecuador, we've got Iraq, again, terrorism, Iraq, import oil. Oh, this all sounds like a genius idea. Oh, we do have friendly Canada here, though. We got Canada. They're probably the only ones that would continue sending us oil. We had a major war because, that whole North America thing. And here's where we start to get into some of this stuff. As California Assemblyman Stan Ellis, USC professor Michael Meesh, he's the guy that said, hey, we think gas is going to go up to $8 or $12 a gallon, somewhere in there back in October, because of basically a deep study they did that we're going to take a look at. And that's part of where the preface for this, not the preface, but the concept for this is that this is a national security deal. You don't have enough fuel, fly your planes, run your whatever. Can't really protect the country. West Coast is just completely exposed because of California's policies. And they've been policies for decades and decades and decades. Petroleum expert Michael Iriza warned recently, without oil and gas, the other 92% of the states of California's GDP would be impossible to attain because it's in everything. And then it impacts Arizona. Arizona gets nearly half of its gas from California. The vast majority of Nevada's gas, 88%, comes from California. So not only does it impact California and our West Coast defense, but it impacts adjoining states. And California produces so much stuff. And when cost of gasoline is expensive, production costs are expensive, and then getting that stuff to wherever it's going is expensive because you got to have trucks that have gas and they're not going out of state, fueling up, coming back, taking goods. That whole drill. That's just not happening. Ariza told the Globe that Valero, which announced in April 2025 it would be shutting down its Benicia refinery in April 2026, has bumped the closure date up to January. So it was April, and they're like, we're gonna streamline that timeline. We're gonna shorten it down just a scooch, and this is what we're doing. Phillips 66 refinery in Wilmington shut down on October 17th. That's 140,000 barrels offline. Boom, gone. Originally, Valero and Benicia was slated to shut down April 2026, but they canceled their crude oil contracts over 6 weeks ago, and it looks like they'll be shutting down no later January of 2026. Why wait till later if you can do it today? 4 months ahead of schedule. So, yet one more refinery California won't have. California used to have, I think it was 44 refineries or something like that. And now we're going to be down to 11. California is going to be down to 11. I mean, just the logistics of it. The logistics are just so mentally challenged because you're virtue signaling, oh, we're so green. And it's kind of like Washington State, where we have this cap and trade ridiculous gas tax. It's a gas tax on our gasoline. It's a regressive tax. It impacts those on the lower socioeconomic end the most because they are the least able to afford it. High gas prices, that's expensive. Big chunk of their budget goes to filling up the car. And, you talk about being green? Okay, yeah, right. At what cost? At what cost? Well, these are some of the costs: lack of national security, regressive tax on the poor, the very people that Democrats say, oh, we're so concerned. Kind of like in Chicago right now. Chicago residents, specifically on the south side and west side, are just getting reamed on their taxes. One guy yesterday I did a video on, his taxes has gone from, I think it was $10,000, $11,000 a year to $19,000. And it was not a fancy house, maybe $250, maybe $300. Imagine $19,000. That's because Let's Go Brandon Johnson with his pointy hairdo. He can't get out of his own way to save his, whatever. He's just like, we're taxing everybody. Now in 2025, Valero is not even seeking to try and sell the refinery, even after the state tried to convince Valero to remain open. So state of California, the California Energy Commission was tasked by the governor, podcaster Newsom, hey, can you see if you can find us a buyer and we'll keep this bad boy open? Because looking around, we don't have many refineries left and it's not going to be good. And he's right. But this is decades and decades and decades of policy California has specifically put on these refineries, and they find the absolute you-know-what out of them over just ridiculous stuff. Regulations like, you guys got to have a lot of reserves so that when we have these refineries go down, we won't have these price spikes. But what that does is that puts the onus back on the refinery. And at the end of the day, the refinery's trying to make money. And they're like, nope, no can do. We're out of here. We're going to take our toys. We're going to take our equipment and get the F out. So even after the state tried to convince Valero to remain open, they elected to shut her down, boys. Shut her down. Not sell, not do a remodel, not do a renovation, keep it going, but just close it. Just boom, close it. Instead of shutting down in April, they have moved the shutdown ahead to January, all due to the state's egregious regulations and unprecedented, unjustified fines. This is what's causing this to happen. This is what's causing West Coast, Best Coast to arguably, and not even really arguably, have exposure on a defensive level from the standpoint of, hey, what's our military going to use for fuel? Democrats are like, well, maybe if we just, get out some rocks and we do the David and Goliath thing and we wing the rocks at the Iraqis as they come in because they've decided not to, sell us any. The whole thing is just, at this point, we'll be importing nearly half of our gasoline and 40% of our jet fuel from overseas in those big oil tankers. This is unprecedented in our country's history. This leaves both us and our military at extreme risk to multiple events. Many of these occurred within just the past 8 weeks. We've got the Chevron refinery in El Segundo, which is a big one. It had a big fire. They had to close it down. You got a little remodel time on that. You got a little reno time on that. Loss of jet fuel forced a rerouting of a Gulf tanker from the East Coast to the West Coast and a rerouting of Northern California produced jet fuel south. All right, boys, turn her around. Got to go to Cali because, El Segundo, fire. Fuel oil tanker bound for a refinery in Singapore was hijacked by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. So, dependent upon imports, we were at war. How hard do you think it would be for our enemies to just take a peek around and go, let's see, they don't have any way of domestically producing oil. They're getting imports on those tankers because you're not flying it in. You're not trucking it in because it's not here domestically. What if we took out the oil tankers? I mean, we've known that to happen. Go ahead and Google oil tankers on fire because they've been, somebody's taking them out. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of incidences like that, right? So it wouldn't be that hard to shut things down, would it? Cargo ship at Port of Los Angeles had a huge fire, resulting in it being towed out and away from the dock to prevent damage. All right, can't really get the oil in there. That's not happening. Major Olympic gas pipeline near Seattle. Olympic pipeline spraying a leak, resulting in its shutdown for repair. Those things happen all the time. All the time. And that's why you hear, gas prices up because of one of these little dealios here. But with inability, and it shouldn't be the case, we should be able to domestically produce way more oil, meaning California, because that's the closest state to where I'm at, where there's really any kind of oil production going on. Down in Oklahoma City for Thanksgiving break. And, you just run across oil pumps, just, doing their thing. Boop, boop. Just, you'll be in a residential neighborhood and there'll be a pump jack just right there. Because that's what they do. There's oil there. Don't see a lot of that in Seattle. Very little in Bellevue. None. It's a geology thing, right? Yeah, this is that report we're going to look at. California energy and fuel policies, a clear and present threat to national security and force readiness. Well, now we're kind of getting down to that point where we're like, okay, we're going to lose another 22% of oil production total between the two refineries that are going down. I think it's 22%. I remember hearing 17.5, but Marathon Refinery in Martinez needs to start back up. The PBF refinery in Martinez needs to come back up on full rates. Phillips 66 in Wilmington, it's the one that's getting shut down, needs to be brought back up, and Valero needs to remain online, which is the one closing in January. Immediate federal intervention needs to take place. All other agencies that have caused this problem need to have all their influence in this industry suspended immediately and permanently. All efforts to help our refineries come back and remain online need to be made at the federal level. Could you imagine? Trump steps in and says, hey, you can't shut down anymore. We got to open back up. Here's your federal subsidies to make this happen. But then on the other hand, I just want this to run its full course, right? If the whole defense thing wasn't an issue, if we had the ability, if we had a massive pipeline from West Coast to East Coast, could bring oil in. And I'm just talking nonsense here. If California's lack of ability to produce like it should be able to produce because it's self-imposed, we're so green. We don't want to only have clean energy, which is just not a thing. You don't have that ability to do that. It's not there. We are so dependent upon oil. It's so wildly apparent. And yet you've got these progressives with their ideology that just doesn't jive with reality. So what are you going to use instead? What fuel source are you going to? Oh, windmills. No, you're not. It's just not. Oh, we're going to do solar. Yeah, no, you're not. Look at how much oil it takes to make that whole thing work, right? Whole thing is just preposterous. But we're so virtue signaling. We're such good people. We pat ourselves on the back because we talk about how big oil is just they're ruining the world. Yeah, no, you need it. You need it. And all this stuff that California is doing, all these policies that California has put in place, they're kind of like the people at the No Kings rallies with their sign. They're doing something, but it's not really having an impact, right? It's not having an impact. Saw a meme the other day, and it was at kind of ground level of the Statue of Liberty with the water in the foreground. And they were showing, here's the water level way back when, 100 years ago. Here's the water level in 2025. After all of, water levels are going to rise. And they were exactly the same. Exactly the same. There wasn't any change whatsoever. So, what's all this nonsense? What's all this nonsense? So, all efforts to help our refineries come back and remain online need to be made at the federal level. This is due to mechanical issues and lack of qualified personnel. For instance, if Valero goes down, that's the one we're talking about in January, for a significant amount of time, very few people are available on the planet that can help bring it back online due to its unique complexity. You only got a handful of people. Hey, can you get that bad boy going again? It's not like, let's just do a little jump start from battery to battery and it should be fine. All good. It's not like that. The technology is such that, like the article says, there's only a few people who can make that happen. All right, how we're going to getting it going again? Well, why'd you close it down in the first place? Now, Gavin Newsom and a bunch of losers from California said if we keep doing this, we're dependent upon oil. What a bunch of knuckleheads, right? I got through a decent portion of this report. This is from the USC guy, Mish, and Michael Riza, petroleum professional and U.S. Navy veteran. I'm just going to do a couple of bullet points, and they're towards the end of this, kind of the summation of what you've got going on here. Let's get down to it. For any Asia-Pacific operation, you're talking military now, California's refinery and in-state oil production will be essential to the fighting effectiveness of U.S. forces, and any further losses will compromise U.S. force readiness. You don't have the fuel to run the forces. Think Gavin Newsom's thought about this? He doesn't care. He doesn't care. He just wants to be able to virtue signal, we're so green, the greatest thing ever. To compensate for California's actions, the American taxpayer, you and I, have to pay additional costs and fees to acquire, transport, and store the fuels that were once produced in California. As it currently stands, California has lost a significant portion of its gasoline production from October 16, 2025. Closure of the LA area of Phillips 66 refinery, all that stuff. Lose another 145,000 barrels a day of Valero refinery. Between 2023 and 2025, California's refinery production will have cumulatively dropped by almost 22%. Took out a fifth of its ability to produce. And that's when you've already constrained it from 44 refineries, I think it was, to whatever they have now, 11. I mean, it's borderline on just criminal, because you've got so much of a dependence upon foreign oil. Wherein, like the case of Brazil is a huge chunk. You got to clear the rainforest to do that. Oh, it's so green. We're so green. Go ahead and just take a DA to that oil. The rainforest, it'll be good. It's all good. It's all good. And then bring it over on one of those, oil tankers that we saw that are literally one of the worst producers of emissions into the atmosphere. But don't worry about that, because we get to virtue signal. California gets to virtue signal that we're green. We're so clean. We're such good people. We're so good to the earth. We're so good to the environment. And it's just a massive charade. And it leaves us on a defense, end of things, exposed, wildly exposed. Loss of the pipelines will necessitate hundreds of additional trucks to be used, California's road, to transport both crude oil and fuels, predominantly to the few surviving northern refineries. So now you're going to have trucks, and you're going to have what it points to as road blockages, accidents, equipment failures. Create backups, because now you got to do it all on the road. You can't domestically produce it, and you're required to, here's what we're doing, guys. Doesn't make any sense at all. The whole thing just doesn't make any sense, but it's what we're doing. And that's why I think folks now are saying, hey, this is a matter of defense. This is a matter of national defense. Got to do something. Will anything happen? Now, Trump's fighting so many battles. The Attorney General for state of Washington is just yet another knucklehead. And he's literally making his career out of suing Trump. So Trump's just getting sued 10 ways from Sunday over the most ridiculous stuff. And that's what Washington State does. We're going to protect you from the Trump invasion. Seattle Times, all they do is they just have a huge hard-on for anything Trump does, and then they paint it in a terrible light. It's like, when are we going to get over ICE deporting criminal illegal aliens? When is that? When are we going to lose interest in that? When is the left going to lose interest in that? Because I'm for it. I'm totally for it. Hey, Get the criminal illegals out. If they have a deportation order, out. When you see stories like in the Seattle Times, 55% of those deported didn't have a criminal record. Well, other than the fact that they were here illegally, there's that, tiny little detail. They came into the country illegally, making them a criminal. No, they didn't have a criminal record, but that doesn't mean they didn't commit crimes, and maybe some of them didn't. But you got to have a policy, right? This is where the policy just absolutely takes you sideways because you don't need it. This policy is totally unnecessary. But Democrats have to virtue signal because that's what they do, not based on reality. None of this is based on reality. Just like Biden, we got at least another 10 years. You're like, what? What are you talking about? Honestly. And you heard like Republicans at that State of the Union address just start laughing. They're like, the old man is just absolutely off his rocker. He's just saying stuff he was told to say and he doesn't even understand. So here's point number 7 in this report. Call for presidential action and immediate relief. Californians pay the highest gasoline prices and are burdened with the highest taxes and environmental program costs in the nation. Consequently, California consumers suffer at the pump. Washington State suffers at the pump too. I was explaining this to one of my son Brennan's friends. We were on messaging on Instagram, as you do, and kind of going through Washington State, why our gas prices are so high, and why California's gases are so high. Because if you haven't been paying attention to this, you just think, it's on the West Coast. You got to get fuel for. No, it's policy. It's internal policy that dictates all this. It's all policy. Why things are so expensive on the West Coast. It's all policy. Furthermore, California, through its history of legislative actions and consequential implications, leading to the loss of in-state fuel production, pipeline capacities, and refinery losses, has demonstrated an incapability. This is where it gets good. Incapability. California has an incapability to recognize an inability to preserve the national security interests of the nation. Take it over. Fed needs to take over California's oil and gas. Just boop. What would that look like? I do the boop as if it's like something you can do like that. But could you imagine? California doesn't want us to deport criminal illegals, let alone take over their oil and gas interests. Could you imagine that? That would just be civil war right off the bat, right? It just would. And podcaster Newsom, he would just virtue signal a bunch of nonsensical stuff, and people in California would go, he's our guy. He's our only guy that's standing up to Trump. As well as the economic interests of neighboring states, Nevada and Arizona, with respect to energy production. California and the nation can ill afford a self-engineered and created California gasoline and aviation fuel costs. Both the economic and national security interests are profoundly influenced and sadly compromised by California's political sentiment and legislative actions related to refinery operations and oil production. You might say, well, Sean, no. How many have shut down? Chevron. Yeah, we're moving to Houston. The need for action is now, and the potential for a crisis caused by California's selfish, green, completely inept policies, creating a contagion effect on U.S. force readiness is imminent. It's time for presidential intervention and national oversight. Love to see that happen. God, wouldn't that be great? Taking over. Be like, something out of Handmaid's Tale, right? Just bring in the troops. All right, here's what we're doing. We're opening everything back up. Problem is these are all private enterprise, right? It's not like these are state-run refineries. These are private businesses that have said, no. So how would you do that? Mandate that they open back up? This article did get into, there's a few things that the president of the United States could do, some executive action, some emergency acts, some stuff like that. But is that going to happen? No. What we're going to see is we're just going to see how this thing unfolds, and there will be more refineries that will probably close, and that supply will be further restricted. Gasoline prices will continue to go up, and our exposure to foreign threat will increase. It won't get better. It will increase. And at some point in time, we'll have to pay the piper. That's the way this kind of thing goes, right? And it'll be one of those stories where, well, why aren't we able to fly our planes? Well, California, through their internal policies, shut down all the refineries. We don't have the ability to domestically produce what we need to. Those planes are grounded. Oh, can we bring some in? Nah, they all said no. And I'll podcast that when that happens, if we have power. You know what I mean? Crazy stuff. Absolutely nutty, crazy stuff that shouldn't be happening. You don't see this in Oklahoma. No. Red rule. All right. That's it for me on this one. Thanks so much for being here. Love to have you subscribe. Hit that notification bell. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.